Hi, Morally Recapped here. Today I'm going to explain an American comedy drama film called The Late Bloomer. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The movie starts with great potential for our hero since a big-bosomed blonde woman plainly asks him to have sex with her. But then the camera reveals Pete is a therapist. His client is addicted to sex, and he suggests she reads his book, which will supposedly change her way of thinking. After the credits, the movie starts for good and we see Pete going through his everyday routine, which mostly consists of him speaking to a recorder and telling it about some new ideas he wants to include in his next book. When he returns in his apartment building, he's greeted by a young man, Josh, who tells him a story about the horrible date he had. Pete evades the situation with some advice and humor. Pete walks into his house and finds his best friends in there, sitting on his couch and watching a movie. One of them is married with kids, Rich, and the other one is divorced, Luke. Pete seems to be the most mature person in comparison to them. He tells them he has to go because his neighbor Michelle has some guests over and he is invited. He grabs a bottle of wine and walks out of his apartment. He strides to his next-door neighbor and knocks on the door. Nikki, not Michelle, opens the door and asks him why he came alone. He was supposed to bring a charming friend with him. Pete explains that one of his friends is married and the other one is on Tinder. Both of them not suitable. Pete escapes Nikki, but he bumps upon Connolly, an overenthusiastic guy who watches sports on his smartphone and says it's for work. Pete says they have met a couple of times before, but Connolly doesn't remember him. Pete then proceeds in the kitchen, and he finally meets Michelle, who has been busy preparing some new dishes, her unique creations. Pete tastes some food and compliments the delicious taste of it. He motivates Michelle to open her own restaurant, but she claims she's not ready yet. Pete is clearly into Michelle, but Connolly crashes the moment when he walks in and kisses Michelle. When Pete returns home and goes to bed, he speaks to his recorder again and asks a question which obviously explains his situation with Michelle. Can it be love without sex? The next day, Pete stops by his parents' house and says hi. Mothers will always be mothers, and his mother has prepared his favorite brownies. He doesn't stay long because they start asking questions about his plans, if he has any dates. Pete's father is somewhat negative about his son's job, but his mother is very proud. She asks her husband why he doesn't approve Pete's job, and he says that it doesn't make any sense to him how his son writes books about sex when he hasn't ever had sex himself. Pete's female boss, Caroline, has some great news for him and says she suggested him for a TED Talk and they accepted him. His book is going to reach millions of readers now. Furthermore, she has booked a radio interview for him, the new Tony Robbins, as she calls him. Pete returns in his apartment building and sees Connolly banging on Michelle's door, saying that it's just work. Apparently, they just broke up. Connolly walks away and tells Pete he is lucky he dates dudes instead of women. Pete knocks on Michelle's door and she opens it when she realizes it is Pete. He comforts her and helps her see her own worth. She decides to channel her energy into being a chef. They come real close and Michelle takes the initiative and kisses him. Pete feels uncomfortable. Michelle says she's sorry. Pete says it's okay and suddenly has a terrible headache. He returns home only to sit on a chair, wondering what the hell is wrong with him. In the morning, Pete is abruptly woken up by his friends. They have a basketball game today, and they won't go away if he doesn't get up. Simultaneously, Michelle is banging on his door. He walks out of his apartment and talks to her. She apologizes about yesterday night because things got weird. His friends are watching them, and they argue if Pete is gay or not. Moments later, as they walk in the park, they tell him that he should have made a move on her. They argue if Michelle needed compassion or just some good sex yesterday night. Meanwhile, Michelle tells Nikki the story, and Nikki suggests that Pete is either gay or a serial killer. The boys play their basketball game, and Pete gets accidentally hit by the ball at some point and he passes out. They take him to the hospital, where it's revealed that Pete has a brain tumor, which has been surpassing his male hormones for his whole life. That tumor is the reason why Pete has never had an erection, and he has not gone through puberty. The tumor can be removed, and it will, and that will allow Pete to live like a normal man. His manhood will be furthermore developed like it does with all men, a realization that makes Pete happy. He removes the tumor, and his friends and parents visit him at the hospital. His parents feel especially happy since now Pete will be able to experience the full range of his masculinity. Pete takes some time to recover at his parents' place. Luke and Rich visit him and have a surprise for him. They have brought a professional stripper to try and give Pete his first erection. The stripper dances for Pete, but her dance affects Luke and Rich than Pete, who doesn't get his first erection yet. Good luck strikes Pete the next morning. He finally has his first erection. His parents notice and they cheer for him. He leaves their house and returns at his place where he experiences for the first time the simple pleasure of self-satisfaction. And then he does it again and again, all day long. Pete eventually meets with Michelle, who tells him that she's about to travel in Santa Barbara to participate in a program for chefs. They hug, but Pete immediately backs off because he keeps having strong erections, just like a teenager would. Pete returns in his office and has some meetings with his clients, but now he is different, and he finds it difficult to do his job. He has a new perspective in life, and his hormones are just different. Anything that his clients might tell him gives him a turn on, and he can't really concentrate. Puberty has its downsides too, so it's only natural for Pete to wake up one morning and find out that his face is full of pimples. He visits his doctor and asks for his help. He says he's always horny and moody, but the doctor can't really help him. He explains that what he's going through is perfectly normal, and he better enjoy it. Michelle comes by Pete's apartment to say goodbye because she's leaving tomorrow for her cooking seminar. She tells Pete that he's been different since he returned from the stay at his parents' place. Pete assures her that they will have a lot to talk about when she returns from the seminar. He will be ready to talk by then. The next night, Pete is chilling with Josh and they are playing video games. Michelle video calls him and they briefly talk. She tells him that she is the instructor's favorite student. She is at his place right now with a couple of other students. When they hang up, Josh observes that Pete has gotten jealous. Pete refuses, even though he is jealous. It's time for Pete to have his radio interview with Naomi Wilcoxon. She introduces him to the listeners as the writer of his famous book, which focuses on sexual energy rechanneling. Pete starts talking about how time-consuming sex is, and his voice suddenly cracks and becomes high-pitched. He drinks some water, but that doesn't fix the issue. The interview continues in that same fashion. After the radio show, he has lunch with his parents. They tell him not to worry. His voice crack was not a big deal. They suddenly start fighting, and Pete shouts at them. He gets up and walks away. His father actually smiles and says he's been waiting 15 years for Pete to do that. Pete also communicates with Michelle later on and fights with her as well because of his jealousy. The next day, Pete and his friends are having a basketball rematch with those other guys. Pete is so full of energy that he dominates the game. He even takes trash talking to a whole new level, something that he has never done before. He is so passionate and energetic that drives the other team away, maybe a bit more aggressive than he should. Pete meets with Josh, and they have a talk about women. Josh says that he'd be killing it if he was Pete. He has money, a car, a house. They have a conversation about their crushes, and they both feel disappointed about it, but Pete decides that it's time to take action. He creates a Tinder account and starts dating and have sex on the regular. Michelle returns from the seminar and finds some flowers on her doorstep. She asks Pete if he left them there for her. He didn't. Connolly did. But Pete grabs the opportunity and says he left them there for her as a welcome back. They talk for a bit and arrange for a dinner in 1 hour. Rich calls Pete and reminds him that he has to babysit his children because he has his wedding anniversary tonight. Rich has some big plans for himself and his wife. Pete has forgotten about that, and he completely rejects Rich. Pete receives some advice from Josh, who tells him not to be a nice guy. Pete takes Michelle out on the restaurant, where Rich had reserved a table for himself and his wife. Michelle asks him how he managed to get a reservation in this place, and Pete replies, "He's got this." Pete tries to step his game and behaves not like himself. That makes Michelle dislike him and asks him what's up. Pete says he's nervous and he returns to his usual character. But then, Rich and his wife join the scene, and a verbal fight breaks, making Michelle feel uncomfortable and leave the table. Pete runs after Michelle, but she can't understand his behavior. She has also found out that those flowers were from Connolly and not from Pete. She leaves disappointed. The next day at his office, Pete breaks his anger out by having sex with one of his clients. His boss Caroline catches them on the act, and she puts Pete on hold. Pete visits his parents, and he has a bonding moment with his father. They enjoy a beer, and he tells his father he can't control what's happening to him. His father says most men can't control themselves, and not just in puberty. He shares a backstory of a past mistake and concludes that there is a difference between acting like a man and being a man. Pete asks his father if he has ever felt embarrassed for his son, and his father firmly says no. Pete also says that he feels uncertain about his TED Talk. His father suggests he should just be honest and tell the truth. Pete gets on that stage and he expresses his real thoughts. He says that his book has been missing an important point. He says that sex is awesome and brings people together. It's a form of connection, so as long as it is mutually beneficial, do more of it. Following, Pete visits Rich's house and apologizes for everything. They forgive him, and their connections return to normality. His friends inform him that Michelle is back together with Connolly, and she has also been hired as a sous chef in her instructor's restaurant. Pete bursts in that restaurant along with his friends and demands to speak with Michelle. She doesn't want to hear it, but Luke and Rich won't let Pete go until he speaks his heart. Pete shouts his story in front of everyone. Michelle breaks up with Connolly on the spot, and Pete finally kisses her. The ending presents Pete signing copies of his new book for his teenage fans. A pregnant Michelle stands right next to him. Subscribe to see more videos like this, turn on the notifications, and leave a like to help the channel grow. Thanks for watching.